Thanks, everyone. A very good afternoon. I'm Aman Bandvi from India Blockchain Alliance. Uh, these are my co-panelists, and before I introduce them to you, I'm assuming that all of you are very familiar with supply chain. So we will not bore you with what the intricacies are, but we'll like to enrich you and share a new thought around transparency, traceability, and the trust factor, which is the most crucial form in today's time. The emerging tech today, AI, ML, blockchain, it's a buzzword. I don't know how many of you are familiar with blockchain, but blockchain is something that is now becoming synonym. It's a synonym for trust, a technology that when introduced, when integrated in your regular operations, enhances the level of trust and transparency. And in fact, it ensures that you are on the next level of traceability. How do I say that? Supply chain from sourcing to fulfillment. You can now safely assume if you're using technologies like blockchain, across the entire journey, you will be getting signals, you'll be getting assurances, you'll be getting flags, whether the journey of your product, your services are on the right track, they're not been tampered with, and this enhances your trust on the overall ecosystem. I have with me Mr. Samit Datta from PGP Glass. It's a Blackstone company. He's got a wealth of experience from marquee clients, marquee corporates, IBM, and others globally. And he's Mansingh Jaswal. He runs a startup, GenEx Logistics. We have Srivatsa, who's running TraceX. By the very name, you can visualize that he's offering services which are which are promising a high level of trust. And we have Brigadier Vinod Batra here. More than 3 decades of service in the Indian Army. Indian Army is a different elephant altogether. So how the supply chain in the Indian Army, in the military context, is making a change, is embracing new technologies and giving the entire citizens a new level of trust is what we will be discussing here. To start this conversation, I will first like and request Mr. Samit Datta to bring to the table the overall journey that he has been a part of from the corporate side, because that is something that all of you will be familiar with. It might resonate with some, it might sync with some. From the corporate perspective, he can tell you what were the main challenges for which technology per se is considered. Transparency, traceability, how important were they? And are these two to be equated with the high level of trust? What has been his experience? I will like him to first share his thoughts. Over to you, Samit.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. So, the topic of today is a very interesting one. It talks about traceability, transparency, and trust. I think there's one T which is missing, but we are talking about it is technology. And everything starts with trust. And what is trust? Trust is a belief. Trust is where I say that I am being reasonable, where I don't believe that, you are being unfair. How do you establish this in an organization? So in a manufacturing organization, or for that matter, any corporate, there are multiple stakeholders. There's a supplier on the one end of the supply chain. You have your own internal operations that is there. And then there are customers. The manufacturing or businesses of this nature, corporates, are actually trying to tie each of these. Now, how is it different from anything else? One may ask this. It's very different because there are many to many relationships and there are many to many entities that we work with. So the whole onus is, of course, to make money, but the onus is also to make money so that you are viewed as a trustworthy supplier. And to get this trustworthy supplier part of it, we need to then be absolutely open and transparent. And how do you then get transparency? Transparency doesn't come by just saying that I will be transparent. You have to have processes, you have to have cultures, you have to have people, you have to have several elements. One of the elements that is there, which we've seen over the periods of time, has been technology. And through technology, whether it's a track and trace technology, whether it is standard ERP, which brings in visibility, we are able to then tie in all these various elements and bring in this entire transparency from end to end, such that we are able to predict and then offer to the customers what we've said we've done. This whole circus that's going on has to be synchronized. So we start with bits and bits and bits and bits, and then we must also have one element where we are trying to tie these things in. So I'll give an example. Just take 1 minute. I'll give an example. We started with an IoT of a initiative in our company where we started monitoring each and every machine and the output of that machine. So while that gave us a lot of transparency about the machines and what's happening in the machines, in itself, it was not worthy. You had to then connect it with the ERPs to ensure that when a customer order comes in, you're able to predict and then look at variances with your plans and then see how you can deliver. And then post that delivery, we, of course, because we are an export-oriented company, we had several technologies which did track and trace right up to the customer end. This gave them that kind of belief that this is a company which says what it does, it walks the talk, and that's what we try to do in terms of the trust.
Samit, I want you to continue actually. I see a lot of young people in the room. So I want you to define what is how can we say the supply chain is transparent or lacks transparency in the first place? I believe that would set things into a much better perspective. How do you say you don't trust the supply chain, and what is missing that you had to do something?
So I think COVID has taught us that you have to be consistent and reliable. If you're just consistent, if I'm doing a bad job and I'm doing consistently bad job, that means you're a useless guy. You qualify to be a useless guy, and the converse is true. The consistency is, I think, what is valued more. People do not like variations. Now, easy is said, but very difficult to do, and that's where synchronization is very important. I think trust comes in from that perspective, saying that it's like even at business levels, the investors want to know how much you'll get in terms of top line and bottom line, and whether you're within a small variation of that. If you've overperformed, there's every chances that your stock price may go down. So can I predict what I am saying and be consistent and deliver it day in and day out, day after day, night after night? I think that's what will, determine how reliable a supply chain is, and that is what will determine how well your business will grow.
Excellent. Consistency and reliability. Over to you, Brigadier sir. The way that we would like you to be a part of this discussion is, while Samit has given us this corporate perspective, Brigadier sir will give us the perspective from the military side. And the other two gentlemen are techies. They have built the technologies which are going to enhance or introduce the aspects of transparency and trust. So I would first like you to listen to these two. Then we'll come down to the younger gentlemen to tell us how they did achieve what was lacking. So Brigadier Saab, over to you.
The military logistics is quite different from the commercial logistics. The commercial logistics, as you know, is cost-based, whereas military logistics is need-based.
Cost is not a problem.
Cost is not a consideration. If in case an item has to be reach a particular area, it has to reach no matter what the cost is.
So I believe everyone will appreciate that because we are dealing with the defense of the country, and so hence. So
in military logistics, failure is not an option. You cannot fail. So hence, we need to have very robust systems and very reliable systems and adequate redundancy in our systems so that they can sustain any operational requirements. Infusing technology has got a lot of limitations in the defense forces. Foremost, there are requirements of security, secrecy in all our operations. The scale at which we operate is much larger than any commercial or government organization operates, and our supply chains are very complex. We have troops of almost about 14 lakh troops spread across the borders, along the LOC and the LAC. We have almost about 2 lakh vehicles that have to meet the day-to-day needs. We have almost about 32 lakh individuals whose healthcare has to be taken care of and their habitat has to be looked after. Considering the enormity of this kind of operations and considering that the limitations of technology, we need a customized systems which no commercial organization is able to offer to us. So we need to build the systems for our own requirements. Secondly, we have various kind of equipment. We got about an inventory of almost about 5 lakh items. Now these 5 lakh items have to be distributed across the country, and an ammunition stockpile of almost about 10 lakh metric tons. Now, our equipment life cycle is almost about 30 to 40 years. During the life cycle of the equipment, we have to ensure that the equipment is serviceable. The equipment, as it enters into the service, it needs to be overhauled at periodic intervals. It has to be repaired and kept serviceable. These are all costly equipment. Same goes with the ammunition that we have. The ammunition consists of large number of components, like the fuses, the explosives, the propellant, and so these components have different shelf lives. One component may have a shelf life of 1 year. The another component may have a shelf life of, say, 10 years. To keep the ammunition serviceable at all times, we need to have systems which can monitor the ammunition batch lot wise and see that it is repaired at frequent intervals whenever it is required. Then we have got a budget.
Please continue.
We have got a budget of almost 5.5 lakh crores, a yearly budget of 5 lakh crores. And the procurements that we do is almost to the range of almost 2 lakh crores in a year. Now, as you would be knowing, that most of the large defense procurements come under a scanner. We have had the Bofors scam and multiple other scams right from the independence days till now. So we have to ensure that the systems that we adopt, the modern systems that we adopt, have got total, are able to trace all our transactions right from the inception stage when the qualitative requirements of the equipment have been given till the procurement end stage of the procurement, so that we are removed from these kind of allegations that are frequently take place during any large military procurements.
Sir, one question. You brought out the topic of secrecy. So in one context, when you're speaking about transparency, am I to equate as layman? I don't know much. How do secrecy and transparency go together? What would be your take on this?
Well,
are they opposites, or am I reading it wrong? I'm actually speaking for all of you. If you have the same question, you can.
Secrecy is primarily from our operational
Point of view. Yeah.
That the opponent should not know what kind of operation and what are our plans.
So if they are able to know, that you'll say is lack of transparency. So I'm narrowing down on what is missing that I'm giving.
We would not like to be transparent to our opponents.
Okay. So the technology has to be robust enough.
Technology has to be very robust. Like the modern technology that we talk about is IoT, the blockchain, the additive manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Not all of this technology can be adopted by the Indian Army because of its inherent constraints. Like IoT has got an inherent constraint of
Cybersecurity.
Secrecy. Security is the major issue. AI ML, again, the AI is basically a black box technology. The black box algorithms are built into it. We cannot, because we are an auditable organization. We are being government funded. We are an auditable organization. All our transactions are audited.
So I'll ask you to have a little pause here, because I think now it establishes the corporate side and the military side. I'll request Mansingh. Why don't you take the stage and now you give us your perspective and how did you manage to bring in? And first of all, I'd like you to give your sense on what is lacking that you're fixing.
A lot. The first of all, everyone knows supply chain. And that's how I have interpreted in the last 25 years of my working in supply chain, though I'm still learning, but everyone else knows supply chain. That's my sense. Why supply chain, what technology, and blah, blah, blah. I'll come to that a little later. But first of all, I must say, after COVID, all of us are sitting in this particular room. After the deadly COVID, we are sitting in this particular room, right? It's a commendable job, and you deserve a clap, or all of us deserve a clap, because you have an element of resilience in all of you, right? You have the element of resisting and recovering, and that's exactly, what reflects we as a human body is resilient, right? Respond to every, bad thing to it, it recovers from it. So now, how can it reflect or translate into organizations? That's exactly what we're talking about, resilience in organizations. And how does supply chain relate to that? Okay, we'll come to that. My sense is this resilience is likely to be a basic skill for every organization in the time to come. So it's not likely to be something that is talked about in these stages or something. It needs to be a basic skill. You remember Boy Scouts, where in the schools, what used to be boys and girls, taught there in the Boy Scouts, the very basic elementary skills, right? Rock climbing, tying, various things. You're doing very, very, homely things or something which enable them to have additional skill in terms of life saving.
I believe in corporate professional do it as outbound training programs.
Exactly, right?
As a means of unwinding. Okay.
So this is likely to be this way. Look, I'll come back to trust. What is trust? And how is being transparent related to trust? Okay. So how many of you are married in this particular room? Okay, not very many.
Just 5?
Right?
Oh, we have a very young audience.
Yeah. So the young ones, so the young ones, would certainly have their partner in terms of boyfriends and girlfriends and friends, right? Now, my simple question to you is, how many of you know the password of your partner's phone? Okay.
All the married ones.
So that's about trust and that's about transparency.
That's a very nice way of putting it. And I don't think everyone must have given a thought that way.
Right. So that's about transparency and that's about trust. Right. Now, in the consumer side also, what companies do, and that's a little different from what the brigaders have told. In army, cost is not a matter. In the corporate, cost is the only matter. Right. In army, the competitor would not want to be knowing what the army is doing. Here, transparency, you tom about being transparent, not only to the competitor or to your customer, but everyone, all the stakeholders. So there's an absolute different.
You get bragging rights.
You get everything, right? Not transparency. What does transparency mean generally? It's about being visible. But what is visible? What do you want to see? So that you say this transparency is good or this transparency is bad. Why companies talk about transparency? We are transparent supply chain. What is transparency in supply chain? So for different companies, for different products, transparency would mean different things, right? For a company like H&M, they would want people to know that they're sourcing, the sourcing where they're doing, right? They're compliant in terms of there is no child labor. There is, absolute compliance in terms of the environment. Why? Because they are projecting to their clients, their consumers, that, hey, look, world, we are caring for the environment.
Purpose-driven.
Right? Purpose-driven. Right? We do not, use any practice which is anti-human, which is anti-environment. Right? And this, similarly, this can be different. I mean, Marico, some time back, they started, sourcing copra, which is used, this is the basic ingredient for making these oils. They started sourcing copra from the farmers directly, right? There was a social element in it without altering the cost. So they didn't cut the margin that the brokers were taking. They continued with the same margin passed on to the farmers, and there was a social element connected to it, right? It created sustainability in terms of sourcing. It also connected, different kind of a bond between Marico and between the supplier. So you actually build something which is a long lasting. And what is that long lasting relationship? Now, what is a relationship? That's ultimately the trust that you're building, right? So trust is the basic building block. You ultimately, whether you're a brand, whether you're an individual, Why do you go into the social media? You try to project to the people that yes, you're a trustworthy, you're being, you have 100,000 people in your network. So these many people trust you. That's exactly what it means, right? So organizations, brands, and individuals all put together, they vie for trust. And transparency is something which comes in between, because you want to show to the people that this is how I build trust. So that I'm transparent, I'm showing you this is what I do all the right things, I can show these things to you, I'm showing these things to you, and you should trust me. That's exactly brands are doing. Right?
Excellent, Mansingh. Excellent.
The second thing is traceability. Now, this is a circle. This is you Samit told, this is a circus. This is actually a circus. Right? Now, transparent, I'm telling the people that this is what I am, this is what I do, this is where I buy my jacket. This jacket is being made by so and so. They use so and so technology, which does not discharge any pollutant to the rivers and blah blah blah. So this is how we look at now traceability. Why traceability? All these things are happening because the decision. Now, who takes the decision? Decision taken by the consumer, because I'm communicating the consumer, right? Decision is taken by the consumer. What decision does he take? Whether I would like to buy this particular product or this particular product. There's a competition available in the market. Now, which product would one buy? So primary driver probably would be a cost. But if costs are similar, what would you go for? You probably go for something which is not direct. It can be their social responsibility. It can be something that they're doing to the society or to the cultures or to the environment. No, everything is okay. Products are also similar, but this company is doing little better to the society. So why not go for this particular? That's exactly what we do, right? So how this is all happening is because the decision making. Not decision. I mean, I as a company would make decision based on what? Based on the information available. Now, where do the information is? The information earlier used to be the very broader aspect of information, right? What is happening in the market, what my competition is doing, what this is doing, what that is doing. And that's how I build my strategies and would, plan my products, in the market. What is now happening? The time lag between the event happening and the decision making, they're shrinking.
Okay.
Right? And how it is happening? You get into the social media, you watch a particular, clip it in social media, and you get bombarded with a similar kind of stuff. What is that? So you watched a particular item, that's an event happening. And you get bombarded with a similar kind of, events or similar kind of clippets in your social media. That's somebody who's already decided that what is to be shown to you. So the time lag, which used to be probably in months and weeks and days and minutes and seconds, it has now come down to milliseconds and microseconds. Right? So traceability becomes important because you as a brand, you as an organization, or you as an individual also, you need to know when what is happening. Because if you are reacting after the happening is done, then you're only reacting to it. And that's called you're trying to resist. Right? If somebody is hitting you, you probably will do this. But if somebody is hitting you and you're not there, his hit will be a waste. And that's exactly, what is happening now. Right? So traceability is important. Now, what is traceability? That you go to capture that event first. Right? So you need to know where the event may happen. Now, when you capture that, you need to have the technology to capture that. Second, you need to relay that particular information for somebody who will take decision based on that particular information, right? Third, you need to store that information somewhere. And now so much of data, we talk about big data. Now so much information is getting collected, right? There was so much, to be stored and so much to be interpreted. Why? Because somebody need to draw a story, build a story, and take a decision that what is the next course of action for a particular brand or a company. And that's exactly what supply chain is doing. Supply chain is doing that in the background in terms of physical movement as well as this, this information management, right? But that's exactly what is happening. So the whole thing revolves around trust, and this also takes into account speed. So all this transparency, why this time lag is happening? Because speed is there. Why? Because yesterday I used to expect my shirt, which I order, would deliver in a day or two. I'm okay. Today, I have a meeting at 12 o'clock. I need to have a shirt right now. So I'll ask somebody like, a courier or somebody, please deliver my
That's
shirt
more
at 11:30
specific. That's
so that
more
I can,
specific. Okay.
that's exactly what is happening. So
Okay.
speed is becoming the name of the game, but speed is like allopathic medicine. It has its, side effects,
Yeah.
right? It will come with, your carbon footprints. It will come with your pollution. It will come with so many other things,
Yeah.
right? So speed is driving this. Why are you transparent? Why are you traceable? Because you want to take decision, and you want to take decision. Why? Because you want to be there in front of the customer first. So this whole circle is so, kind of circular. I mean, obviously circle is a circular, right? That some people get confused.
Okay.
I'll give you a very typical, simple example of speed and how the speed, what is the cost of the speed? So I was reading a book by the name Flash Boys by Michael Lewis. The book is written 2014 and 15. And it's about US stock market. This talks about, this talks about stock exchange and, how this high trading, high frequency trading firms work. So, yeah. So in 2007 or before that, most of the stock broker used to operate out of the stock exchanges, floors. Manual, order place hoga or manual buying in, खरीद और बेच होगी. Exactly. So around 2007, 8, 9, the human started getting replaced by the computers. अब human की तो capacity है, किसी की थोड़ी ज्यादा होगी, किसी की थोड़ी कम होगी, तो everyone used to be a level playing. जब computer बीच में आ गए, तो speed को dictate होना शुरू हो गया. So somebody will, use a level 5 computer, somebody is still there in the busy bee and blah, blah, blah. So, don't go with the exact this thing, but that's exactly how it works.
You made it very interesting.
Yeah. So in 2008 or 9, there was a company in America who noticed कि हमारे जो trades हैं, जो हम stock exchanges में डालते हैं, one stock exchange was NASDAQ, which was in New York, and another was, American Mercantile Exchange, which was in Chicago. And there used to be a price differential between the two exchanges. So price differential used to be about, 2 cents, 3 cents, 5 cents. But in a high frequency trade, जहाँ पे आप 100,000 share खरीदोगे, so that would mean something, right? So somebody figured out कि जो हम trade डालते हैं वहाँ पे, उस trade के पहुंचने की, hit करने की जो speed है, it's around 12 millisecond or 16 millisecond.
Okay.
Now millisecond is what? Millisecond is about 1/100th of a second. Okay, मतलब आप जब अपना blink करते हो, right? This would mean probably about what 20 millisecond, 20 such milliseconds. Somebody figured out कि millisecond का काम नहीं, यहाँ पे तो microsecond का है. And they proposed and they took a funding of $300 million to put up a straight fiber line to the high frequency traders. And can you imagine उस 2 millisecond और 2 microsecond को कम करने के लिए उन्होंने क्या रेट रखा होगा उसका?
Enlighten us.
Earlier, it used to be sold at about $30,000 as a rent per month. And this new thing, where the trade could be triggered 2 milliseconds before, it pegged at 300,000, 10 times.
Okay, interesting.
$300,000. And you would say, कौन खरीदेगा इसको? But they did a very smart thing. They only did a 400 lines, one back and one forth. So 200 set बने, and there were hundreds of such traders. So उन्होंने 200 trader को ये लाइनें बेची, and this they made billions out of it. They made billions out of it. कैसे? So इसी तरह से the bottom line is there's a cost of speed, and the cost of speed could be as much as $300,000 for reducing 2 milliseconds, right? And this is whole rigmarole which is happening. आप आजकल भी courier companies देखते होंगे, Amazon देखते होंगे, next day delivery, 2 hours delivery, 10 minutes delivery,
Blinkit, 8-minute delivery.
8 minutes delivery, right?
Yeah.
कई बार ऐसे लगता है कि does it make sense? ठीक है, बट जब हम घर में अकेले होते हैं और अपने को खाना इमीडिएटली चाहिए होता है, बोलते हैं कि यार पहले क्यों नहीं आ गया, 2 मिनट पहले क्यों नहीं आ गया? That's exactly how, right? So our behavior and our reaction also changes accordingly.
Thanks, Mansingh. I wanted to pause here. You raised a very important point. What I've taken down is the ESG reporting that you've touched on. The benefit corporation and the do good company and the supply chain play a very important role there. Srivatsa, now over to you. From a very Indian perspective, I would like you to just give a case study of what you found challenging and how did you contribute to elevating that?
Sure. By the way, my job has been made so easy. Everyone, my co-panelists have talked about the 3 Ts, and I'll talk about the 4th T, that is the technology, and what's our humbling experience working in this market, right? So I'll probably go through some of the use
I
cases.
like to make it in a way 1, 2, 3 steps so that
Sure.
immediately everyone can know that this is what was lacking and this is what you brought to the table.
Perfect. So we'll discuss a few use cases, which starts with an objective of transparency as a culture. I'll borrow some of these discussion points from my co-panelists because they all align eventually to the story that I want to construct, actually, right? Centered around transparency and not traceability, transparency and trust. These are the 2 points that a brand wants to build their culture around. That's where it all starts. For example, I'm talking about a coffee, very young coffee startup, which is out there in Bangalore, that's offering the same product which everyone else does, but then they want to give it a different spin to it. They're saying, look, I source this coffee from the Valley of Araku, the Arabicas, the pure Arabicas, which is where they're grown, from the Valley of Araku. Secondly, my coffees are freshest coffee compared to anyone else. So now you go to Starbucks, you have a great coffee. Starbucks is obviously amazing coffee, but then you don't know how fresh the coffee bean itself is. But neither do you care when you're having the coffee. But if someone comes and says, look, my coffee is 1 week older than the other coffee, I don't know how many days ago it was roasted. That's when you will start thinking about it. Right? Which comes to a point that Mansingh was talking about, creating stories from the data points that's available, right? So now just imagine this company wants to build its brand purely basis that the point that my coffee is the freshest coffee and it's the purest Arabicas that I have sourced. But how do I actually communicate this? What do I need? I need to know my supply chain well enough to be able to communicate a real story to my consumer. So what do? I work with the farmer producer companies in the Valley of Araku. That is where my Arabicas are grown. It was grown in the year 2022. Harvest happened between November to February. That's something which is information available. How do I get this information? Unless I'm working closely with my networked supply chain partner. So anywhere, if we have to build a comprehensive trust in a supply chain network, it's very, very important to work very closely with your network supply chain partners, right? So technologies like blockchain, what they bring essentially to a network. I'm not talking about a benefit to a single organization. I'm talking about a benefit that technologies like this can bring to the entire network. A coffee company wanting to build its story around transparency. The farmers in the Araku Valley that are growing coffee using all organic methods. They're not saying that it's organic coffee because up there in the valley, if you've been to Araku, it's impossible to carry the pesticides and chemicals up the valley and then start spraying it. They might as well say, let me not spray it at all. I will use biodynamic farming and I will do the farming. But that story needs to be communicated. So the idea there is the practices that are being followed by the farmers in the Valley of Araku, which is documented by someone who is supporting them. Again, a partner in the supply chain network, who is capturing information right from how old the plantation to when was what were the best practices followed in the plantation, coffee plantation, to when was coffee berries plucked, when were they fermented, when were they, when did the fruits pulped out of the coffee, and then when were they dried, and when was the raw coffee now sent to upstream, so or rather downstream. Raw coffees cannot be consumed as it is, right? So that's the production side. Then comes coffee curing, which does actually cures the coffee, right? Then after coffee is cured, there's a roaster who roasts the coffee. After coffee is roasted, then the brand is branding it and then selling it. So connecting all of these things. So that's what a technology like blockchain could potentially bring in. Ability for everyone to tell their story. On one side, farmers are telling their story. On the other side, the brand is telling their story, and consumers are buying from this trustworthy brand very conveniently, very confidently rather. So that's, yeah.
If you can explain a little bit for an average person like me and some of them, youngsters, if they go to Starbucks, the example that you've given,
Sure.
how does it manifest to them?
Sorry,
How does it touch them? How would
Sure.
they know?
Sure. How do they know the freshness of the
Or the supply chain has been trustworthy
Sure,
or transparent?
absolutely.
What do they know?
Absolutely. So essentially, it again depends on what story someone wants to communicate. Right? What is important that the brand has realized that I want my customers to know. We work with a brand that, like I said, they talk about essentially various things, not just about sourcing from the valley of Araku to freshest bean. They talk a lot about quality of the bean, the testing that was done. When we go to Starbucks and then have coffee, a lot of them are actually hardcore coffee drinkers. Some of them are youngsters as well. I hear that a lot of them, our generation probably was whiskey, and now this generation is a lot to do with coffee. So they would want to understand very clearly about the testing that was done on the quality of the coffee. Where was it tested? How was it tested? What are those minute parameters and attributes of what they're having? That's what essentially could be communicated. It's all captured as part of the traceability journey, but
So
that could be
these are the data
communicated.
points. What I understand, and you are all, you can all ask questions now. But what I understand, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
If there is a packet that I'm about to purchase of coffee, it has a QR code there.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
And I can scan that QR code on my smartphone,
Absolutely.
and it can tell me the journey if the corporate so wants to communicate, or the
Yeah.
user so wants to know whether it is organic, it was in Aman's farm, it was plucked on January, it went from. So this is what the entire ecosystem
Exactly.
is about, the technology in blockchain, and this is what you bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And this is what can, this is how it reflects
Exactly.
to them. That is how it is visible to them.
Exactly. But
Okay.
one point
Please,
that I want to
please,
mention there.
please.
One is QR code as a means to
Yeah.
a purpose, right? The other one, let's say we work with a milk brand. So again, there I've been told on an average the milk that we get is about 7 to 8 days old.
Yeah.
That's the milk we get, whether we like it or not. That's what
With
it is.
examples, it makes it a little interesting.
Yeah.
So, please,
The
you
brand
got a
that-
cue.
Sure. The brand that we work is, they want to very, very conscious. Again, going back to their culture, transparency as a culture, right? They want to actually go out and boldly make a statement that this milk is 2 days old.
Okay.
Right? That's the difference that the company wants to bring to the entire ecosystem. They want to actually promote the culture of transparency. So therefore, they don't hesitate to go out there. This is one of the largest dairy in Bhubaneswar,
Okay.
right? And what they essentially talk about is how the how the milk is sourced from the collection centers to bulk milk chilling centers to when was it manufactured. And they half a liter milk, which is just 28 rupees. And they're not saying that by giving traceability, I'll be able to market my product at 30 rupees. All that they're saying is I will create a differentiated brand. They put a small trace ID on the milk packet. And there is a consumer app that all consumers can use and then quickly try and find out the entire story about the milk, including certifications.
So it's a step up from what we have
Yes.
today, that is packed on, let's say, 16th of November.
Yeah.
So the new technologies makes it much more interesting for the consumer. Samit, I'd like to bring you again in the discussion. Oh, sorry.
So, while the two of them were talking, and I was
Yeah.
just thinking about some absolute opposite end
Interesting.
examples.
Please do.
So, how many of you drink out here? Single malt whiskey?
Am I permitted to raise my hand?
Yeah,
Oh, thanks. That goes without saying.
My God, people out here don't drink. Okay, fine.
Okay.
How do you now buy a Shiva's legal? You buy it by seeing it's a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
How do you know it's 12 or 16?
Mm.
It's an absolute opposite of the fresh coffee. Here you want to, speed is slow, jitna hoga, utna jyada value hoga. Absolute bland opposite.
Yeah.
So, like he mentioned about coffee, there's roasting, there's those various steps in whiskey brewing also. Aging, how do you age it? What kind of a peat do you put in? What kind of a cask do you put in? How do you know at the end of the day it's giving that unless you open the bottle?
Yeah.
So you expect it to be smoky, it turned out to be something else.
And temperature is also a spoiler here. So I think believe you're
Correct. So since I'm in the business of manufacturing bottles, bottles are something which is supposed to make it inert. Bottles don't react with the liquids as much as, let's say, a wooden cask would. So we are expected to retain that freshness or that taste or that flavor And we are supposed to give that same transparency and ensure that when this bottle now finally goes into the stores and into your bar, and even after it's kept in the bar, ask the men out here who are a little older, they don't want to ensure that the Macallan is being, given left, right, center to all their friends. It's very
Dive deep, dive deep.
right.
Tell us how technology did it and how did you
So
do
that
it?
technology,
Yeah. So you're my best friend now.
yeah, that technology of how you're maintaining this and how it is getting sold out, you're actually monitoring this also on sales counts.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, and that's a very inexact AIML problem that we are trying to solve.
Okay.
The second one was Licious. We've all heard of Licious.
Yeah, non-veg
Lish-
delivery, yeah.
Yeah, so the meat brand, right? The meat brand. So apparently their story is that they do not sell anything which is beyond 24 hours. Is it true? I don't know. But I do know of a startup which is called Perfectly Made. Okay, Perfectly Pets, I think it's called. It's a Bangalore-based startup. They actually use the older meat of Licious, which is greater than 24 hours, and they actually cook that for pets.
Okay, interesting.
So now you're seeing two different startups or two different organizations collaborating with the data and transparently passing on one's, I won't call it reject, but one's
Excellent. I believe the conversation started making sense. At
less
least for me.
less transparent, in a transparent way, but a trust system, and we are actually selling it at various levels,
Okay. Okay.
something like that. So this is how now you connect supply chains, and the whole idea is about within an organization you can still connect it, and I called it a circus. When you actually extend it and get into, we were talking about ecosystems, this actually becomes even, the power of that becomes even larger. Now, again, since we have a lot of young people in the crowd out here, today's India talks about a lot of startups and all the, beautiful, successful startups with lots of technologies. It's important that we understand that we contextualize the technology to what we are trying to do. Please do not follow it as a fashion statement, which is what I'm seeing a lot is happening, because this is actually creating a lot of disturbances to organizations as well as to the startup world also. So important thing is to contextualize. If blockchain doesn't work for me, I don't need to burn my heart out or boil the ocean to make it work. Maybe it's better to get onto something else. And therefore, this context understanding is extremely important.
So you're saying in some cases technology is not a magic wand. It might be an overkill actually.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
So we had an example, and I'll give that example.
Please.
We were looking at a trace mechanism at the end of the, every vehicle should have a data logger which will give a GPS position. So it worked very well for the first 20 days of the month, because we were using transporters who were our trusted transporters, who were using their own vehicles. Each one of them had that system on their dashboards. But we all fall sick in the month end. We all eat more in the month end. This is a bimari of corporates. We are all month end SKU based people. We sell more soaps in the month end. We consume more medicines in the month end. There's something unique about this.
Yep.
When that happens, your need for your trucks go up. And at that point in time, your transporter may not be able to give you his trucks. So now he's getting trucks from the market. So you suddenly have a system where you have, at the month end, you have 200 trucks of, let's say, the transporters' trucks, which have data loggers, and 600 which do not. And you're still supposed to manage the supply chain. So what we realized is that this was not a good way. So we actually said, okay, let's regress into technology. Instead of a data logger GPS-based system, let's go to a SIM-based system where the driver logs in with the SIM, and he then, as he travels and he moves from one base station to another base station to another base station, I get the distance. That is good enough. And I geofence it. The moment I geofence it, an alarm comes in, the factory starts operating.
Excellent. Excellent. So before all of you get your second chance, I'd like to request the audience, if you have any questions, you can please pass them on to us.
So what are your thoughts in terms of eliminating that
Samit will take
completely?
it. Yeah, please do.
Do you think the industry is also responsible in taking that first step towards elimination?
I'll attempt the answer. It's not an easy one. तो ताली दो हाथ से बजती है तो आपकी बात बिल्कुल सही है. But think about it that corruption has been there in this country when I was born. It'll probably be there when I die. But I think the flavors and the elements and the values have just changed. With more technology coming in, and I think even the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister's push is to go towards more e-procurement and things like that, things are coming down. Yes, at the end of the day, this is just not about technology. There is also stuff which we spoke about, which is governance, which is about compliance, our own laws. You think about it, Companies Act 1956, we are in 2022, it's 70 odd years old. So are very archaic, and therefore it's left to the person's interpretation. And the moment, things have to fall in tandem for things to really spread out. Either this is one way, which is the way it will happen in our country, and that's going to be slow, or you do it the China way, which is like, say, clamp down. This is what it is. Now, I don't think we may go that way. So I think we will have to overcome this. And like 1980s, 1990s, telephone penetration was nothing. Today, a panwala also has a phone. So I think these are things.
Evolution keeps happening.
Yeah, I think we have to look at it.
Yeah, all of you can have one minute last word, please. Starting with you, Mansingh. Yeah.
So, take an example of passports. So 10 years back, there used to be a special person who used to coordinate, "Main aapka passport bana dunga," right? And he used to give a, that parchi, tear it off, parchi, a number laga aapka, and I'll stand there. You don't need to worry. I will charge my fees. Today, it is changed completely, right? Now, if somebody comes to you as individuals and asks him, "Main aapka passport bana dunga," you'll stand up to him that, "Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm not going to, go that way," right? So one, there's a technology, which is at the play, which has helped building an ecosystem, which is making you stand up for yourself that, hey, I'm done with, I can manage it myself now, right? So these three things are working simultaneously, correct? You talk about GST, correct? The system is, I know there may be some, flaws and, issues somewhere other, but the system is such that if my vendor does not submit it, it's me who's getting affected. So I'll make sure that please submit it, deposit it. Otherwise, your payment is likely to be affected next time, right? So, it's a kind of replica of what is happening in the blockchain, right? It's connected. So yes, corruption is there. It was there, but the magnitude of it can certainly be altered, right? With the technology into the play, and simultaneously with our role as a society to stand up against it.
Thanks for being very optimistic. Samit had given a pessimistic over, but I'll again hand it over, Samit. 1 minute for you, then 1 minute for.
To your question, and I was just thinking, there are still the big elephants which are not in GST. That's one reason why we still breed what we have to. But from a conclusion perspective, I think we must be contemplative of what we want to do and how we want to do it, with the view of gaining that trust. And we need not chase the best looking film actress in town, and I'm using this as a metaphorical thing of technology, and contextualize it, because that will give you the bang for the buck.
Excellent. Srivatsa?
I'm very, very positive about how people are thinking about established trust, right? And then also the technologies like blockchain bringing in that empowerment. We've been having conversation with, and I see more and more organizations these days wanting to follow the principles of Web3, where we are saying that, look, I will be a distributed organization, but autonomous organization on a community. Everything is boiling down to building community. I'm no longer thinking that's the trend. I'm not saying we'll take a few years to get there, but I think that's where technologies like this will be helpful. For example, we're having a chat with Nestle and Olam and stuff like that, the large organization. They're saying, look, I want to take an approach of a community. And that's where I think it starts. Large corporate starts pushing for it. I think the rest of the ecosystem will fall in place. So that's my take on,
So,
You're talking of trust. Now, here in a army parlance, when you talk about it, the army soldier who's firing his weapons and equipment he has to have a full trust that his ammunition will fire well in case there is an operational requirement. Now he was talking about coffee.
Yeah.
Another person was talking about single malt whiskey. Here I would talk about ammunition.
Yeah.
Ammunition, the raw material comes from various sources. The fuse is like maybe coming from ECL or Bell or whatever. So in case the ammunition meets with an accident, there should be a traceability to be able to trace back as to what are the reasons for it.
Okay.
Why the ammunition has failed during operations or during test firing or during training periods. So we need a total traceability of the ammunition and see that the ammunition remains effective and does not fail us during operations.
Thank you, sir. So concluding, we've been asked to conclude now. So I'll take cue from what you said, Mansingh, around the ESG and the purpose-driven ethos that a company can project. So using transparency and traceability of the supply chains, the company will be in a position to market themselves better. And it can also be motivating for them to introduce the new technologies in a very contextual way. Samit said that all technologies are not the magic wand. You need to first audit it properly and see what fits best. You spoke about communities and made it much more interesting. And Brigadier Saab, you brought a very wealth of knowledge that always keeps us on our toes, that whatever we do may not just be the right dose that we're doing. It just might not be enough. So with that note, thanks audience. And I hope you have some food for thought after this discussion. We enjoyed it as much as you did. Thank you so much.